Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're plunging into a subject that really challenges not just our medical understanding, but also some deep ethical boundaries, brain death. And we're asking this really profound question. When someone is declared brain dead, are they truly, completely gone? Or is there maybe more to it?
It's a powerful image, isn't it? Think about someone in a hospital bed. You see their heart's beating on the monitor, their body's warm, a ventilator's moving their lungs, hormones are even still being produced.
Yeah.
And yet, legally, they've been declared dead. That's the standard definition of brain death. But it immediately raises that question you just asked. Is that person really gone?
Okay, yeah, let's try and unpack that. So
Yeah.
our sources really start by looking at the definition itself.
Yeah.
What exactly are we talking about when we use the term brain death?
So brain death technically is defined as the irreversible loss of all brain function. And that specifically includes the brainstem.
All function, including the brainstem.
Okay. Right. Once doctors determine that threshold's been crossed, the person is considered legally and clinically dead. That's the key thing. Even if machines are keeping their heart beating and lungs breathing.
And this is formally laid out somewhere.
Yes, exactly. This definition was really solidified in the Uniform Determination of Death Act, the UDDA. That was back in 1981.
UDA, right.
And the UDDA basically says someone is dead if they've sustained either, one, irreversible stopping of circulatory and respiratory functions. Heart stopped, not breathing.
The traditional way we think of death.
The traditional way, yes. Or two, irreversible stopping of all functions of the entire brain, including the brainstem.
So, looking at it legally then, it sounds quite absolute. There's really only one kind of dead.
Legally, yes.
Person who's warm, pink, heart beating, lungs going because of a machine. Legally, they're just as dead as someone whose body has turned cold after their heart permanently stopped.
That's the legal stance.
It seems straightforward on paper, maybe, but that's where the biological questions really start bubbling up, isn't it?
Absolutely. This is where the legal framework and the biological reality can seem to diverge, and it's why it's fascinating.
How so?
Well, think about it. What if that body can still do things like release hormones, heal a wound, or in some incredibly rare cases, even continue a pregnancy for a time?
Wow. Okay.
If those kinds of integrated physiological functions are still happening, doesn't that suggest the body as a whole organism is still functioning, still coordinating its system?
Right. It calls into question that idea of total cessation.
Exactly. And so many scientists, physicians too, are beginning to re-examine those criteria. They're asking, if the body can still perform these integrated tasks, maybe death biologically hasn't fully occurred in the way the law defines it.
And this isn't just a theoretical debate, right? Our sources point to actual cases.
Oh, definitely. There have been these high-profile cases, you might have heard of some, where individuals declared brain dead. Well, their bodies maintain functions for days, sometimes weeks, even months in some instances.
Months?
Yes. And families sometimes reported seeing things like warmth, maybe slight movements, or even signs of growth, like hair or nails.
Now, that doesn't mean the person was conscious, obviously.
Well, no, absolutely not. Consciousness is gone. But it does suggest a biological reality that's, well, much more complex than just off or on.
Yeah.
And this complexity is kind of echoed in experimental science, too. There are studies showing some brain cells, believe it or not, can show activity hours after the heart stops circulating blood.
Hours after. That really challenges the idea of irreversible brain death.
It certainly makes you think about what irreversible truly means at a cellular level. It challenges those long-held beliefs.
Okay, but what's the counter-argument? What do supporters of the current definition say?
Well, it's important to remember, supporters stress that brain death is fundamentally different from, say, a coma or a persistent vegetative state.
Right, those are different categories.
Completely different. In brain death, the assessment is that the brain is completely non-functional, zero activity, and crucially, it will not recover.
So, from that viewpoint,
from that perspective, any continuing bodily functions, the heartbeat, the warmth, they're considered almost like incidental. Vestiges of bodily systems that are running on autopilot, maybe, but they no longer reflect the presence of a living person, an integrated organism controlled by a brain.
Okay. And this distinction, this definition, it leads us straight into a really difficult, critical area.
Huh?
Organ donation. Can organs ever truly be taken from someone who is completely biologically dead in the traditional sense? Because once the heart stops, the organs deteriorate so quickly.
Very quickly. That's the challenge. And it's why organ transplantation often relies on donors who have been declared brain dead.
Because their hearts are still beating.
Exactly. Due to artificial support, their organs are still getting oxygenated blood.
Which brings us to this thing called the dead donor rule, or DDR. What is that exactly?
The DDR, the dead donor rule, it's essentially the core ethical principle guiding organ donation. It states, very simply, that vital organs should only be taken after the donor is actually dead.
Okay, an ethical rule, not necessarily a law itself.
Not a law per se, but a very powerful ethical norm. It formalizes that widely held belief that, it's fundamentally wrong to kill one person to save another.
Right.
So the goal of the UDDA, the legal definition of death, combined with the ethical DDR, is to provide assurance, to assure patients, families, doctors, everyone that declaring someone brain dead means they are dead, making organ removal legally and ethically okay.
But if there are these questions about whether the body is still biologically active, does the DDR hold up? Are we potentially harvesting organs from someone whose body isn't fully dead, just their consciousness is permanently gone?
That's the heart of the controversy.
Yeah.
And our sources definitely highlight considerable debate about the validity of the DDR in practice.
Because?
Well, for one thing, as we touched on, the diagnosis of brain death itself might not always be perfectly reliable in reflecting irreversible cessation of all functions of the entire brain.
You mean some functions might remain?
Potentially, yes. For example, some basic homeostatic functions regulated by the brainstem, things like controlling body temperature or managing water and electrolyte balance, sometimes these can persist even when someone meets the clinical criteria for brain death.
That seems like a significant detail if the definition requires all functions to cease.
It is. And it gets even more complicated. We mentioned those rare cases where bodies can survive for long periods.
Right. Years even, you said.
Yes, with all bodily functions seemingly intact except for consciousness and those brainstem reflexes. This really pushes the boundaries of how we define death itself.
So it's not just brain death then. These questions extend to other types of donation too.
Absolutely. It directly impacts donation after cardiac death, or DCD.
DCD. Okay, what's that?
So over the last, say, 15 years or so, with the organ shortage becoming more critical, there's been a bigger focus on DCD. These are cases involving patients with severe brain injuries, but they are not brain dead.
Okay, so they don't meet the brain death criteria.
Correct. But they, or their family, might decide that given the prognosis, the best course is to withdraw life support.
And they still be donors.
Yes. If that decision is made, the patient is typically taken to an operating room, life support is withdrawn, and then everyone waits for the heart to stop.
Waits for cardiac arrest.
Right. And once the heart stops, the physician observes for a period, usually a few minutes, maybe up to an hour, depending on protocols, to make sure it doesn't spontaneously restart.
And then they declare death.
Yes. Then they pronounce the patient dead, and organ recovery can proceed.
But wait. Going back to the UDDA, that requires irreversible cessation of function. If the heart just stopped, surely it hasn't irreversibly stopped. You could potentially restart it with CPR.
You've hit the nail on the head. That's a crucial point raised in the sources. Clearly, in DCD, the heart hasn't irreversibly stopped in the sense that resuscitation is impossible.
So how did they square that with a dead donor rule?
Well, this is where some tricky language comes in. To avoid violating the DDR, the argument has been put forward that permanent cessation can substitute for irreversible.
Permanent instead of irreversible. How does that work?
The idea is if there is no intention to attempt resuscitation, then the cessation of function is considered permanent, even if not strictly irreversible, and therefore the patient can be declared dead under the cardiac criteria.
That sounds like a semantic workaround.
Our sources basically call it that, a rhetorical device, a semantic manipulation. They argue it's only necessary because of the need to satisfy the dead donor rule.
Meaning, if there were no DDR.
If there were no DDR, you wouldn't need this kind of linguistic gymnastics to justify declaring death before organ recovery in DCD cases.
This also touches on another really sensitive point, doesn't it? The act of withdrawing life support itself.
Yes, the question of causation.
Right. Since the Karen Ann Quinlan case back in the 70s, the generally accepted ethical view has been that withdrawing life support isn't causing death. It's allowing the patient to die from their underlying condition.
That's been the standard ethical framing, yes.
But some of the material we looked at challenges this view quite directly.
It does. The argument presented is that, well, this framing might not be entirely accurate from a purely causal perspective.
How so?
Think about it this way. As one source illustrates, imagine two identical patients on ventilators. One is disconnected by someone who wants to harm them. The other is disconnected by a physician following the patient's expressed wishes or family decision.
Okay.
In the first case, we'd universally say the person who disconnected the ventilator caused the death. The argument is it's inconsistent to then say that in the second case, the physician didn't cause the death. The immediate proximate cause of death in both scenarios is the act of disconnecting the ventilator.
But morally, they're worlds apart.
Absolutely worlds apart. And that's the crucial distinction. The sources stress this isn't about assigning blame or saying the physician did something wrong. Withdrawing life support, when done appropriately with consent or advance directives, is not a legally or morally culpable act.
So the key isn't the causation itself.
Exactly. The central issue isn't who or what caused the death in a mechanical sense, but rather the overriding ethical principles. Respect for the patient's autonomy, their right to self-determination, their informed consent. Those principles are deeply established in both ethics and law, and they justify the withdrawal of support.
Okay, so given all these complexities, the definition, the biology, the DDR, causation, where does this leave the discussion? Is there a push to change things?
There definitely is. Our sources show growing support, particularly in certain medical and ethical circles, for reevaluating the brain death criteria, maybe adding more stringent tests or finding ways to better align the biological, legal, and ethical definitions.
And what about the dead donor rule?
There's a significant argument being made to move beyond the DDR altogether.
Really? Why?
The primary reason cited is about honoring and pursuing truth. The argument goes, if physicians come to understand, based on the biology, that brain-dead donors and DCD donors aren't really dead in the traditional irreversible circulatory sense, then continuing to claim they are dead solely to satisfy the DDR potentially undermines professional integrity. It risks diminishing trust.
But wouldn't abandoning the DDR jeopardize organ donation? People might worry organs are being taken too soon.
That's the fear, and it's a serious one. But the proponents argue this isn't about dismantling transplantation at all. It's about achieving greater transparency, respect for the facts, and scientific accuracy.
They're saying be honest about the biological state.
Essentially, yes. There's a strong caution against using the greater good argument, like, accepting donation from those not entirely dead because it saves lives, because that kind of reasoning can be a slippery slope. It could erode public trust if people suspect doctors are prioritizing organ recovery over saving the potential donor's life.
People need to trust doctors are focused on them first.
Yeah, absolutely. That trust is paramount.
So what's the proposed alternative if we move past the DDR?
The argument is that the ethical prohibition against physicians causing death isn't absolute. We already accept withdrawing life support based on patient autonomy. So the guiding principles should remain respect for patient self-determination and fully informed voluntary consent. With those firmly in place, it's argued, we can ethically withdraw life support and recover organs from consenting donors without needing the DDR and what some call its underlying fictions or semantic workarounds.
And the benefit would be?
The suggested benefit is clarity. Abandoning the DDR, these sources argue, could eliminate a lot of the confusion and misunderstanding surrounding different definitions of death. It might allow us to return to a single traditional standard of death that everyone understands, the irreversible absence of circulation.
Wow, that's a pretty fundamental shift being proposed.
It is. It challenges decades of practice and established norms.
So as we wrap up this deep dive then, where does that leave us? It sounds like brain death is still the standard legally and clinically.
It absolutely is. It's widely accepted, and critically, it enables life-saving organ donations that help thousands of people every year. That cannot be overstated.
It's not simple. Biologically, ethically, there are clearly complex, unresolved issues.
Deeply complex and unsettled, yes. And it seems clear that many within the medical and scientific communities feel it's genuinely time to revisit and potentially refine these crucial standards and definitions. The conversation is definitely evolving.
A lot to think about. We hope this deep dive has maybe challenged your thinking a bit, perhaps sparked some new questions for you.
And just a reminder, as always, this discussion is for educational purposes. If you have personal questions or concerns about brain death, organ donation, or related issues, please speak with a qualified medical professional or ethics advisor.